Hello, this is an assessment for reconditioning of a Broadwood upright piano made in approximately 1915 and effectively known as a green framed Broadwood. Now before we look at the green frame from which it gets its name, just to look at the cosmetics. These can be tidied up and the piano is in reasonable condition on the outside. The key tops are extremely good ivory key tops and they do need buffing ideally. They're a bit dull, which means that they tend to attract the dirt when they're dull. Now the felt on the back of this music stand stay needs replacing. As you can see, it's marking the fall here, so that's a small cosmetic job obviously. The casework's in fair condition. We can probably improve that a little bit, and the front panels, just a few scratches here which perhaps 2 or 3 hours on the casework tidying it up will help. Although you can see there's a fade line here where this fall's been held up, and that's where the candlesticks, the what we call sconces, were, and just generally a few bits that's worth tidying up while we have it in the workshop, and our polisher's available to do that. There was a cloth on the back here. Normally you don't need dust cloths on the back. That was for when the days before vacuum cleaners, although this is dirty, so again that could be cleaned up. I see a very old removal badge there. And then looking at the soundboard, is in very good condition. You can see, well, not really see, there's a slight line there where the planks join, but that's not anything to worry about. Now looking inside the piano, you can see why the piano's got its name of Broadwood green frame piano. My colleague tells me that that was British racing green, which was very popular, and no doubt they were following that. I expect if you want to find more out, you can look that one up. But a very tasteful colour as well. And in the trade, green frame Broadwood is regarded as one of the very best Broadwood uprights, and we can tell by the tone. It's a very nice piano, very mellow, good break point, very well designed piano. Now it's quite a short piano, it's about 116 centimetres high, so the bass strings aren't that long, but they do pass quite near the centre of the soundboard, so that gives you quite a good bass sound really. And a very pleasant tone in the middle, main singing area. And good break point here too. And there are some hammers here, which, that one there for instance, is sounding very soft. Now they do need refacing, and that will certainly make them less soft. Sorry, the focus has lost a bit here. There we go. So they do need refacing in this case. Sometimes when hammers are indented, they still sound really pleasant. But that one there, I want you to see if you can see that the hammer's actually not quite... when it goes to the string, it's obviously been screwed back on at some stage, because if you watch that, it's moving sideways. As a result, the part of the hammer hitting the strings is a softer part, and that makes it sound a lot softer. Let's see if we can listen to that. So the one next to it and that one. So if we look at the ends of both of them, let's try and push them both together. So the one on the right moves sideways, can you see that? And the one on the left just hits straight on. So it makes a huge difference in terms of tone. So it's very important, if you take hammers off and put them back on again, that they are in exactly the same position. It's got the original return tapes, the piano of 1915. I'm not sure if I mentioned the date of the piano, but about 1915. Broadwood numbers are difficult to determine, but I think that's probably the date. And I think the Broadwood frame came in at 1914 roughly. So if you're in the trade and can correct me on anything, please do, because I'm not an authority on Broadwoods, but I really like the pianos. I'm not an authority on anything really, but obviously some of the German makes we do more of, and Broadwoods we know less of. There's a tape that's about to break, so if they were going to be taken off again, they'd start breaking. But it's worth replacing those tapes, I think, really. Now there's several regulation issues that affect the touch of the piano that I want to look at. First of all, the key dip. This is an 11mm key dip measurer, and that's sort of maximum you ever go to really. And you can see that this should be level there, and it's below that key. So in other words, it's greater than the maximum. It's probably 11.5, 12, and it's varied from one to the other. So that would be, so that one there is even greater, isn't it? So probably 12, maybe 12 and a bit millimeters. So that needs to come back up. But we want to look at another issue. And before looking at regulating the key dip, the hammer blow, that's the distance between the hammer and the string when the hammer's at rest, is over 2 inches. You see, 2 and 1/8 perhaps. It should be 1 7/8 approximately. So that's 47 millimeters. But there may be a reason for it being set too far. That could be just to make the action a bit heavier. Let's just think about that. Now, a greater hammer blow does give it a little bit more of a heaviness, and it's a very nice feel that it has at the moment. So it's necessary to think this through. Now, first of all, the weight is very low, so that's 40 grams, and it's going down, and a bit varied. So that one is just with a bit of encouragement probably going down. There we are. So about 40 grams, that one too, a bit less, and that one again we probably need some encouragement. That one too, and this one going straight down. So 40 grams, or maybe just a little bit more. It should be 47 really at least. I'll try and keep this short. There's quite a lot to think through though. There's a bit of lost motion there as I press the key down, so we can see that that one is not moving. Sorry, the hammer's not moving at the same time as this one's got no lost motion. So it's been regulated at some stage clearly, and we're just going to think about that. Now the dampers are lifting off at different times, though it should be about, say, halfway to the string. There's a bit before halfway, and this one here is just lifting off very, very early. And if we look at the tenor one, the ones down here, they're lifting off even earlier. There's a reason for that. We'll look at the fact the spoons are taking up too early in a minute, but there's other aspects I want to look at. So if we reduce the hammer blow, so if you take it, say, to there, then we could do that by pulling this up. In other words, putting a felt at the end there, and then you'd have some lost motion in the keys, which you'd have to take up. But because the key dip is also too great, we can lessen the key dip, and we can reduce the hammer blow by altering the back check. I'll show you what I mean. Sorry, altering the back touch. So I just want to make this back touch a bit higher up, and this is correct that the front end is glued here and not the back end, so we can put some card underneath the back, and that'll lift it up a little bit, and we'll see what difference that makes. Now I've added about 1 millimeter to the back touch. It has a 5 millimeter difference here, and there's just over 1 7/8. So I don't want to exaggerate on this, because it may be good to have slightly bit more hammer. Now we'll have to adjust the hammer rail to meet the hammers, and obviously then we're going to have to do some regulation here, because there'll be some lost motion. Now after we've done all the regulation, if we want to increase the touch weight to a normal touch weight for being able to study the piano, then you want to increase that to 47 or possibly 50 grams. And we can do that by putting weights in the back of the keys. If we look at this key here, it has no weights in the front or the back, so you can add weights to the back, and that will increase the touch weight. So there's what we call the spoon behind there, spoon shaped. Sorry, it's out of focus again. The spoon behind here, the spoon shaped, as you can see, and that pushes the damper off like that. Well, as the wedge dampers wear in, they go further in, and so the spoon contacts earlier, and so therefore they lift off too early. So if we contrast, if we look at the one on the left, the wedge damper, and I'm pressing these two together, and we're seeing that the wedge damper is lifting off earlier than the flat damper on the right hand one, and there'll be inconsistency. Some of them will be lifting off earlier than others. It makes you feel heavier to play, and also of course it may not dampen so well if it lifts off too early. And I'm doing things backwards a bit, because normally you check the tuning pins to make sure they're tight. It's really important, but they are very tight on this piano, and it's at concert pitch and not too far out of tune either, so that's a kind of important foundation. And lastly, I just want to compare this with a Bechstein upright of similar quality. It's a lovely soft sound, and it's too soft really, as we talked about the needing to reface. And then it can be evened up. And obviously it can be kept soft if you prefer it to be soft, a little bit out of tune. But it sings beautifully. Compare that to this Bechstein Model 10, which is a piano that we source very frequently. This one's been fully restored, as you can see. There's another video for this piano. This is a stock piano. And that obviously sounds very, it's been perfected, obviously it's got new hammers and dampers and so on, but this is a reconditioned one. So that's not been fully restored, but reconditioned. It has a beautiful singing tone. And the touch on both pianos, both this and the Broadwood, is both extremely good. And back to the Broadwood. So there's different sorts of sound. They're very, very pleasant. They're both extremely good sound. The touch on both pianos, this and the Bechstein, I'd say as good as each other. Really excellent pianos. Compare that with the Yamaha U1. Much brighter sound, because that could be mellowed if you wanted it to be, but this is intrinsically brighter anyway, and doesn't have the depth of sound a Yamaha than the older pianos have. And the touch on the older ones is just as good. So back to the Broadwood, just want to do a final comparison of the bass end. This is quite a small piano, as we were saying. The strings on this Broadwood are 953 millimeters long, this bass string. I'll compare that with the Bechstein in a minute, but also you'll see that it's overstrung. That means the strings are coming nearer the centre of the soundboard, which gives a better tone. Those are the 4 bottom bass strings. This Bechstein Model 10 is 130 centimeters tall, so it's taller than the Broadwood at 118 centimeters, and the strings here are 1094 centimeters, the bottom string, sorry, 1094 millimeters, beg your pardon. And so let's listen to the bass on that. Now that's not going to the centre of the soundboard, it's further over to the left. So obviously the bottom bass on this one, it's a straight strung piano. They're longer strings, but I think the Broadwood strings are just as good really. And up here, this is further up, is obviously where it really counts, is the tone there, because you only tend to play the bottom bass as an octave anyway. Let's look at that. So you're playing octaves in the bass normally anyway, so it doesn't matter quite so much. It's really the tone round here, and on the Model 10 Bechstein is a wonderful tone round this area. And lastly, looking at the Yamaha, it's much more angled. You see the angle is greater, and it's 1134 millimeters, the length of that, so that's the longest, and it has a better bottom bass, I think, than the other ones. But again, you tend to play them in the octave. It's a good quality piano, the Yamaha, obviously. Having said that, it reminds me how the older pianos were so much more expensively made. When we look at this, for instance, this is plastic, and we've got 2 ring, not really necessary these to put those washers in, but and the plastic feel of this is bad, but obviously the musician's caring about what the instrument sounds like, and the Yamaha U1 is, along with the U3, the most popular, most common upright pianos in the world, but the tone of them doesn't really compare with the old pianos. The touch obviously is the most important thing for the musician, and these are obviously very good touch, but if the old ones are regulated properly, then the touch is as good and sometimes better than a modern piano. And the Broadwood has this beautiful nut that fits on, and is good quality metal, and has even got a slot for a screwdriver and fits beautifully. So that's an assessment for reconditioning a Broadwood green frame piano, 118 centimeters tall, and a superbly designed piano really. Just a bit on the mellow side at the moment, and also needs regulating. The key dip, they're disappearing too far down really. It means it's quite hard to control, especially for very soft playing. Now I think the main work that would improve this piano is refacing to even up the tone, brighten up the tone where necessary, and if you want to mellow it down slightly afterwards, that's possible. The key tops need buffing, they attract dirt when they're not buffed, and general regulation of the piano too. I think replacing the return tapes while it's here would be a good idea, regulating the dampers. So things I mentioned in the video. I hope the video wasn't too long, but I wanted to just compare it with German and Japanese pianos, and just to say that this piano is every bit as good as, has a wonderful distinctive sound, and the trade is particularly fond of green frame Broadwoods. So I hope that's been useful, and thank you very much indeed for listening. Sorry, I just wanted to make this postscript because I went over the video again when I had a rethink about the back touch, which is not something you normally would have to increase the height of. And that's also because that's increased in height. The hammer blows decreased, and this now is exactly right. So the depth here, key dip, is exactly right now. So that's solved that automatically.